Hello, my name is Lisa Elliott and I'm a Senior Attractions Guide here at the National Capital Exhibition. Welcome. Today I'm going to give you a little talk all about Walter Burley Griffin and the development of the Federal Capital Territory site. Before I begin though, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Canberra area and pay my respects to their elders past, present and all of those to come. The title of my talk, it's From This to That. Walter Burley Griffin's plans for Canberra, 513 days of conflict. From this is his 1911 plan to his 1913 plan. I'm going to tell you the story about how that came about. So then we get to day one of the conflict. It's the 23rd of May 1912. The judges, as well as members of the Ministry for Home Affairs, meet in a boardroom. You can see in the photograph that will be displayed on the screen here, you'll see Mr. King O'Malley resplendent in front of the photograph. You'll also notice up the back, there's a man, Keith Murdoch, father of Rupert. He was a journalist for The Age. Conway Clark, I've also pointed him out as well. He was the secretary to the judging panel and a member of the ministry, Home Affairs Ministry. He was also the son of Andrew Inglis Clark, who was one of the chief drafters of the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution. Walter Bingle, I've also marked him out because he's the man who opened the envelope to announce the winners. So the winners are announced. Design 29, Walter Burley Griffin. And don't say anything, but also his wife Marion Marnie Griffin, but her name wasn't on the design because they were a little worried about the prejudices against the females down here in Australia. But I found a little article in the West Australian newspaper from the 28th of November 1913, page 6 for anybody looking for it. It's an article titled, "A Woman of Genius, a Woman Has Designed the Federal Capital of Australia." And in that, the reporter writes, "The architect of Canberra has declared in public that his wife is practically the designer and planner of all the works which have emanated from their house. My wife is the genius, I am only the businessman," said Mr. Griffin. But that's another story for another time. In the newspaper reports following the announcement, it was clear that O'Malley was taking his self-appointed role as chief adjudicator very seriously. One source quotes him as saying, "I am satisfied the best design has been selected. What we wanted was the best the world can give us and we have got it. So far, so not conflicty, but wait." One report quotes O'Malley expressing his opinion that all winners and purchase designs could be used to create a lovely cherry-picked plan. A park might be taken from one, a boulevard from another, and a public square from a third, he was reported to have said. Okay, sounds like a plan, I suppose. In the following days, the gentlemen of the press who were there present for the announcement, they were the chaps standing up in the back of the photograph, they were publishing their thoughts on the announcement and the winners. My favourite piece was written by Mr. Whyte of the Sydney Morning Herald, and it was published on the 27th of May 1912. You can find this on Trove. But on O'Malley's plans for a cherry-picked plan, Whyte warns against the political ambition and personal hubris preventing the Commonwealth from getting the city beautiful that they deserve. Mr. Whyte warned against Mr. O'Malley's plan to do a cherry-picked design, to create something out of all the different designs. He warned that if he did this, O'Malley could be a betrayer of the Commonwealth and that his hodgepodge plan could ruin our efforts to have the city beautiful that the Commonwealth of Australia deserved. But not one to shy away from his own plans because his own plans were best, apparently. On the 27th of June 1912, O'Malley announced his creation of the Departmental Board. They were tasked to investigate and report as to the suitability of the selected and purchased designs. The board included two gentlemen who were present the previous month for the announcement of the winners, Colonel David Miller, who was the Chief Secretary for Home Affairs, and Colonel Percy Thomas Owen, Director General of Works for the Home Affairs Department. Of Colonels Miller and Owen, John Reps writes in his fabulous book, Canberra 1912, both Miller and Owen held the rank of Colonel in the Australian Army and seem at many times to have equated their requests with commands. This is going to be fun. The other board members were my favourite magnificently moustached surveyor, Charles Scrivener, who you will see on the screen here. He'd been involved in choosing the site for the federal capital, and he was the Director of Commonwealth Lands and Surveys. Oh no, we have another colonel, Mr. Walter Liberty Vernon. He was an architect and a fellow of the Royal Institute of British Architects. That was the group who forbade their fellows from entering our competition. We also had George Oakeshott, who was the Commonwealth Director for Works in New South Wales, Thomas Hill, who was the Commonwealth Director for Works in Victoria, and one of my favourites, John Smith Murdoch, who you may know as the architect of Old Parliament House in Canberra. He was the senior architect for Home Affairs. So, got our board. They met, they discussed, they reviewed the designs, the four winners, as well as they purchased 8 designs as well that they wanted to incorporate into the plan for Canberra. You will not be surprised to learn that on the 26th of November 1912, when the board delivered their report, they declared that they were unable to recommend the adoption of any one of the designs, any one of the winning designs, including Walter's, or the purchase designs. But don't worry, because they had a cunning plan. They advised that their plan for Canberra should be adopted and implemented. It is a plan that they wrote which considers that the design herewith submitted fulfills the requirements. It provides for the present and the future and should result in the creation of a city which will be practical as well as beautiful. So I think it looks okay, but I'm a historian, not an architect or town planner. They seem to use the landscape well, it does look pretty. Let's see what the experts had to say. This next slide here, the picture, you can see the departmental board layout. Looking a bit familiar? Yeah, it should, because it is inspired by Walter's 1911 plan. To the layperson, there seems to be little difference, but the experts had something else to say. This is where it gets juicy. The grotesqueness of the result ought to be sufficiently obvious, wrote one critic of the departmental board plan. That was the Sydney Morning Herald on the 28th of November 1912. George Taylor, who was the editor of Australia's influential building magazine, wrote editorials calling for a royal commission into the matter of the design. He was a great defender of and supporter of Walter Burley Griffin initially, but that's another story. But my favourite response comes from the Town Planning Review in January 1913. This is a read that it's on a par with P.G. Wodehouse. For any of you out there who don't know P.G. Wodehouse, hilariously funny. I think Mr. Abercrombie of the Town Planning Review could be even funnier. He wrote, "The new plan is evidently the product of a department whose personnel is utterly untrained in the elements of architectural composition, whose mind, in a turmoil of confusion as regards the simple logic of street planning, have resulted in a road scheme which is simply a reductio ad absurdum. Indeed, the whole layout is so entirely outside the pale of serious criticism that we feel it cannot be put into execution. But my favourite, the road plotting is too grotesque for serious criticism and appears to be largely the result of an office boy's amusing himself with a pair of bow compasses. Sounds like me in my maths classes. No idea what I was doing, I was just playing and making pretty pictures. To accompany their report on the Departmental Board Plan, the Town Planning Review, showing up on your screen now, published a caricature of their design. You can find this in the John Reps Canberra 1912 book, and it's also in the National Library collection, searchable on Trove. I recommend doing that so you can zoom in closely on the brilliant insults within the caricature. Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, the Departmental Board Plan and their lovely, beautiful, ingenious, scattered, chaotic plan, Walter Burley Griffin is being feted all around the world, and he's going on lecture tours and being interviewed by the British and American press. Indeed, the readership of the Building Magazine of Australia, they loved him, and they wanted to know what his idea of the perfect bungalow was, for example, which, in case you're wondering, a bungalow is an unpretentious house with liberal veranda space, having one or more bedrooms on the ground floor. There you have it. Toward the end of 1912, the Griffins and the rest of the world, of course, are finding out about this Departmental Board Plan and learning that it has been approved as the official plan for Canberra and that works were underway. Walter sat down and wrote a lovely letter, which you can find in the National Archives of Australia. It's dated the 21st of January 1913, and it is sent to King O'Malley, who is still at this stage the Minister for Home Affairs. Walter defended his winning plan against the newly adopted Departmental Board Plan, very politely, I might add. If you will grant that these, his designs, are not thrown together haphazard, but are the product of a life investigation and thought, you will not be taking them too seriously, and you may be willing to give them the consideration their sincerity warrants, he said. He asked in his letter that the design board compare his plans with the Departmental Board Plan to see how they compared strategically, technically, structurally, logically, town planningly wise. He also mentioned that he saw his winning design as a first draft. The Ministry of Home Affairs were his client, and to that end he had tweaked his original 1911 plan to incorporate what he could see the ministry wanted from the Departmental Board Plan. And he also requested that he be invited out to Australia so that he could meet with the Departmental Board Plan and the Ministry for Home Affairs and just see what they wanted so that he could revise his design. Colonel Miller said that there is no necessity for the consultation suggested by Mr. Griffin. O'Malley also thought that was a pointless idea. He'd already got underway with the building of Canberra. You can see here on the photograph on this slide, that's O'Malley there, knocking in the first peg on the site. They started building. But it's time for a little jostle in the government. Andrew Fisher's out, O'Malley's out. We now have a new Prime Minister, Joseph Cook. He also appointed himself as the Minister for Home Affairs. They got together, the Department of Home Affairs, on the 27th of July 1913 and said, actually, that's a great idea. Walter should come to Australia. He's the winner of the design competition. Let's get him out here. The press were very excited. As you can see, he's arrived, he's coming to Australia. The plan that Cook had in mind was Walter was to meet the Departmental board and discuss their plan and go out to the site of Canberra so he could see it for himself to revise his plan. Sounds like a recipe for success? Yes? Maybe not. Colonels Miller and Owen had other ideas. They were determined to stick with the Departmental board plan and completely ignored Prime Minister / Minister for Home Affairs Joseph Cook's orders about how to conduct Walter's visit. But by this time, even the Sydney Morning Herald, who'd been a great advocate for Walter and going ahead with his design, they were saying in the press, neither Mr Griffin nor anyone else can induce us to consign the present plan of Canberra to the waste paper basket simply because it may prove to fall short of theoretical perfection. Still less should the fact that Mr Griffin is coming allow us, pending his arrival, to abate a single jot of our energy in hastening on the buildings of the capital. So they'd changed their tune a bit because they were just impatient to see things happening. Others saw it as an opportunity, though, to correct the mistakes created by Mr King O'Malley, the great spoiler of the federal city ideal, as Mr George Taylor described him. And Colonel Vernon, he said it was an opportunity to return to the acknowledged finer points of Mr Griffin's plan. We need him here. But you'll not be surprised to learn that in the final report by the Departmental board after Walter's visit and consultation said that their plan is still the best and that Mr Griffin should be sent back to America where he belongs. After examining the sketch design and hearing Mr Griffin's explanation of the main principles, the board decided they were unable to concur, and that was from their report of the 15th of October 1913. This was also in response to Walter's plan, his preliminary plan and report for the federal capital. He presented this to Prime Minister Cook and the Home Affairs Department in early October 1913. The Departmental board didn't like it, but Mr William H. Kelly, who was one of the secretaries for the Home Affairs Ministry, he wrote to the Prime Minister, "Since we have seen Mr Griffin, we have realised that in him we have an authority in town planning such as we certainly have never seen before in Australia. Keep him, let's go with his plan," was the recommendation. Prime Minister / Home Affairs Minister Joseph Cook thought the same thing. So 513 days after Walter Burley Griffin was named the winner of the Commonwealth of Australia's Little International Design Competition, he signs a contract. You can see that on the screen there with you now. He signs a contract to become the Federal Capital Director of Design and Construction and to implement his 1913 plan that he presented in his preliminary report earlier that month. He came out to Australia in early 1914 to begin work. And as you know, especially those of you living or have visited Canberra, we didn't end up with all the buildings that Walter and Marion designed in their plan, but we do have our heart, and that is the result of Walter's determination to give us the best laid plan. Our heart is the National Triangle that many of you come here to see. So next time you head up to Mount Ainslie and stand there at Marion's Lookout, checking out the gorgeousness that is our National Triangle and all the beauty and gorgeousness within that, breathe a sigh of relief for Walter's determination and thank them because that is the result of their hard work. They won, well, that conflict at least. There was a few more while they were here, but that's for another date and time. thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely day, and do come and visit us here at the National Capital Exhibition. We can tell you a bit more about the story of the development of Canberra. Thank you.